Welcome everybody. This is the Microsoft 365 Platform Community Call. It is November 8th, unless I'm completely mistaken. I think it is. Yes, it is. It's already November. Holiday season is coming pretty soon, which is quite mind-blowing. Time flies when you're having fun. Now, today we have two specific demos. So first of all, we'll go through some of the typical assets and scenarios, what we go through within this call, and making sure that you know all of the assets which are available for you. We'll also go through the latest news and developer documentation updates on the Teams platform side, and we'll do a group photo on the Together mode after that. And then we'll have the real stars of today, who are Bert Janssen and Gary Trinder. So Bert is going to talk about how to avoid throttling in SharePoint Online by using rate limit headers in API calls. So pretty low level stuff, but quite important because the throttling can happen for your API calls. And just to recap, the throttling is there to ensure that the whole system does not go down. So we as Microsoft don't really like that we need to throttle, but it also means that somebody is hitting the service too much, so it would start to have an impact across the other tenants and other services and other customers. So that's why the throttling is in place to avoid those kind of things. You can also think about the throttling kind of a way of preventing denial of service attacks, because we need to make sure as Microsoft that individual requests are not causing a significant performance impact within the service. Now, on Gary's case, we're going to talk about build your first workflow bot for Microsoft Teams using the Teams toolkit for Visual Studio Code, and that should be really interesting as well. Now, before we go to the actual demos and things, let's recap what we have available for the assets for you to get started. So we do have two different YouTube channels. A kind of a teaser maybe on that one. We're looking into potentially merging these two channels in the future to avoid the confusion why we have two different channels. That's a kind of a historical thing as an evolutionary thing, why we ended up having two of them. But most likely we'll have one in the future after a while when we get the stuff sorted out. We have a lot of open source assets available in the GitHub. We also have sample galleries, which will make it easier to find the relevant sample for you. And if you're wondering that there's too many URLs to remember, luckily there's only one, which is AKMS M365 community, from where you'll find all of the links to the documentation, SDKs, tools, open source assets, YouTube, blog platform, and many other assets as well. Now, as part of our community efforts, we do quite a lot of community calls. So this Tuesday, 8 a.m. Pacific time is kind of the primary Microsoft presented call. In this call, the presenters are always Microsoft employees. So we have PMs, developers, cloud advocates, basically showing and explaining the scenarios directly who built it. So the people who are actually working day to day and designing new features are then explaining for you how to get started on using things. We also have a monthly community calls on Adaptive Cards, Microsoft Identity Platform, Office Attendance, and Power Platform. And then we have our Thursday series, which is happening every Thursday, 7 a.m. Pacific time. It's either the Microsoft 365 and Power Platform community call or the Viva Connection and SharePoint Framework call. So quite a lot of calls. You don't have to join, obviously, in all of them. Pick the calls which are interesting for you, and all of them are getting recorded and published in our YouTube channel. So that makes it easy for you to afterwards to go and check out if there was interesting topics which you might have missed. If you're looking into downloading invites for these calls, go to the M365 AKMS M365 calls. From there, you can find all of the links for these individual calls. Now, as you're getting started with if you are getting started in Microsoft 365 development, if you have not yet, please do. You can actually get started by registering Microsoft 365 developer program by using AKMS M365 dev program. This will give you a free E5 developer tenant, which will automatically renew in 90 days if you use it for developer usage. Now, recently there has been some challenges related on that service, and the model of registering, for example, tenants for a specific phone numbers have a bit changed because of we need to be careful that people are not using these tenants for production usage. So that's basically behind for many of those changes. We also provide a lot of training material for you from the Microsoft Learn site. So there's a lot of learning paths and learning modules available for you to get started on doing implementation. We also have two specific podcast series. So we have the Microsoft 365 Developer Podcast hosted by Jeremy Fake and Paul Scheffeling from Adding 365. And then we have the PMP Weekly podcast, which is kind of entitled or implied in the name, hosted by me, Vesa Juvonen, from Microsoft, and Valde Mastercars, who's a senior cloud advocate from the Microsoft side as well. Both of them are good things to subscribe into to stay up to date on what's happening. Now, we also have a lot of samples available. So this is basically the one location where as you're starting to build something in the Microsoft 365, including Power Platform, and you're looking like, oh, maybe there's a sample available somewhere in a GitHub, but it might be really difficult to find it because there's so many locations. Luckily, we are surfacing all of our samples from a one centralized location. So you can go to this one location. There's a new UI, new experience, which was just deployed there on last Friday, so you can more easily find relevant samples for you. And this location has samples from Microsoft and from the community. So we're trying to make this as easy as for you as possible. So really, really cool. More than 1,410 samples available right now. I think it's 1,415 right now. What was the last number, which I just checked before the call. Now, as you then find a sample which you want to use, you might be thinking, okay, now what? It's in a GitHub. I don't know how to get started. We got you covered. And I will let David to talk about the Sharing is Caring program.
Excellent. Thank you, Vesa. Well, friends, that's an amazing number of samples, and we can't wait to see it get to 1,500. But we need your help to do that. And like Vesa said, you may be wondering, how do I get my sample in there? I got plenty. I'd love to share it. Sharing is Caring is a program that's set up to provide hands-on guidance. And what that means is that we're going to work on it together. If you've never done a PR, we're going to show you. We're going to walk you through it. It's going to be a safe space environment, which means we don't record. They are live sessions. So it's free to ask any and all questions you want. We've already got some more getting scheduled up. Power Platform Samples Contributor, and we're going to get that writing for the web back on track. Using PNP SPFX samples with NVM will show you how to navigate some of those weird node version differences and how to use that. We're here for you. So please don't hesitate to register. Keep an eye out at aka.ms/sharing is caring, absolutely free of charge. There is no cost. And again, it's a wonderful, safe space to collaborate with other like-minded, passionate individuals in the community. So don't hesitate to sign up. Vesa, back to you.
Excellent. Thank you, David. On that one, I just wanted to pinpoint the free of charge is really good because everything in the development in Microsoft 365, we're not asking anybody to pay anything. Of course, you'll even get the tenant, free developer tenant, as long as you subscribe to the program, which is really, really, really cool. Now, on the latest news side, there was 3 developer-specific news on the Microsoft 365 developer blog. On last Friday, we published a blog post related on breaking changes in the Microsoft Graph Insights API. It is a super small change on that API. It's not technically even a breaking change, but it is, I'm not going to go too much detail on that one. A property to property has previously been always a specific one. In the documentation, we've been saying that it could be 2 options, and in future, it will be 2 options. So it's kind of one of those really, really small things, but it's a good example. We want to be transparent on our APIs and the involvement of those APIs. So we want to make sure that if there's any changes which might be impacted on our partners, we will openly talk about them. There was also a really nice blog post from Tomomi Imura related on customizing F5 debugging in Teams Toolkit, which results to their code. We're going to see it with Teams Toolkit later today with Gary, so it's a cool demo. And then there was a announcement of SharePoint Framework 1.16 release candidate on last week as well. SharePoint Framework 1.16 is planned to go out in mid-November, and with SharePoint Framework, regardless of the name, you can actually build experiences for Microsoft Teams, Microsoft Viva, Outlook, Office, and SharePoint, of course. That's in the name. Now, on other news and the blog post, we had a SharePoint roadmap pit stop on October 2022, which is a summary on what has happened on a SharePoint side, but that actually includes a lot of other products as well. So there's kind of a summary related on OneDrive, Viva, SharePoint, and many other relevant products. So what are the latest announcements on those? There was a update also on the Viva blog side related on learn about knowledge sharing through Viva topics at the KM World. So right now there's a KM World, which is a knowledge management world conference ongoing. So there's a specific Microsoft stance over there. And then there was blog post related on how to build OKRs, your objectives and key results into your business. So how would you get started on doing that? And that relates on Viva goals, which is a good way of measuring those OKRs. On the team side, there was a kind of a cool, well, really cool announcement that Microsoft Team Progressive Web Apps is now available on Linux. Really shows that we as a Microsoft want to give you the option to use whatever technology and whatever platform you want to use. We will provide our services there. There was also a blog post related on Microsoft Teams performance improvements and how we're continuously investing on making the teams more efficient and more performant. And then if you are using the Teams phone, there was a 6 common questions which were being answered in one of the blog posts. But really, really cool stuff again within the last week. Now, related on the cool stuff, we always want to also cover what is new in the Microsoft Teams platform documentation updates, and Vachit is in the call to talk about them. Vachit, take it away.
Hello, everyone. I'll walk you through the Teams platform updates. So let's start with the first one. So global routing is now supported for bot APIs, which can be used to send proactive messages. A proactive message is any message which is sent by a bot that isn't in a response to a request from a user. So this message can be a welcome message, notifications with updates, or a scheduled message. You can create a conversation if it doesn't exist already, or you don't know the conversation ID. And to create the conversation, you need user ID, tenant ID, and service URL. And if service URL isn't available from an incoming activity triggering the proactive scenario, you can now use these global endpoint URLs. So this is all documented. We have listed all the endpoints URL as well. Second, we have added a new step-by-step guide for sample code to build in-meeting document signing experience. So meeting signing is a Microsoft Teams sample app that enables users to sign documents in a real-time scenarios. It provides enhanced experience by allowing users to review and sign documents in a single session during a meeting. And this sample lets users electronically sign documents with their current tenant ID. So these are the platform updates. If you have any feedback or suggestion, please do post it on ak.ms Teams platform feedback. The link is available in the footer. You could also follow us on Twitter and configure to RSS feeds to get the regular platform updates. Back to you, Vesa.
Excellent. Thank you, Vachit, on that one. And then before we go to the actual stars of the day and the demos, let's do a quick crew photo together. So those who are willing, let's put the video on, and I will share my screen, and we will put everybody into together mode. Where is the together mode setting right now? There we go. They keep on changing the buttons and locations of things. It's always so confusing. So here we go. Now we're getting to the together mode, and I will select a bit different scene this time so we get some variance on the pictures. So let's use that one. I like that one a lot. We're not yet recording. Let's wait. Let's wait a while. We get the 50 seats. Good stretching on the back. Yeah. There we go. Are we getting anybody else on the call? Anybody else? Anybody else? I will put the recording on in any second. And dun. I will. Okay, so you will see when the numbers are going down. Let's do some hand finger, everybody. We will capture a GIF animation out of this. Thank you, everybody, once again joining. Really awesome to see you on the call, and hopefully we'll see you in the Las Vegas or Copenhagen and the in-person conferences, one of the conference options later this year. Thanks, everybody. We'll grab a GIF animation out of that. Good work on Paul on the middle. I saw you're being a good example of how we do this. Excellent work. Thanks, everybody. Good. So then we'll go to the actual stars of the day, and we'll start with Bert Jansen. On the how to avoid being throttled. Pretty low-level stuff on the API level, but super important to know. And then after that, we'll go to Gary Trinder and talk about the Teams bots or bots created with Teams Toolkit. But Bert, I can see on the video. I guess you are good to go.
Yes, thank you, Vesa. I'm sharing my screen.
Yep, I can see the screen.
My name is Bert Jansen. I'm a senior service engineer inside the customer engineering organization in SharePoint and OneDrive. And in my day-to-day role, I do talk a lot with ISVs, with customers, and throttling is a common topic. It's like, I think, 1 out of 2 calls, throttling somewhere pops up and we have to talk about it. So before diving into the technical demo around rate limit headers, I would just want to step back and say and demystify SharePoint throttling a bit, helping you understand how it works. Vess already in the introduction really explained very well, like, why do we need throttling? We need throttling to ensure that not one particular user, one particular application is not jeopardizing stability for all the other tenants inside an environment. So because we share resources with many tenants, we have to have a fair use policy, and throttling is our way to achieve that. Okay. All right. So imagine you have a funnel, which you see over here, and your request comes in. What will happen? The request comes in, then your request, for the most part, request is tied to an application. So if you have an Azure AD application and using that application, you make a call to a SharePoint API, you're on this bucket, in this application bucket. And this applies for both delegated and application permissions. A request can also just have a user linked to it, or both. Request, if you use delegated permissions, your request is coming via an application, but we also know who the user is. Most common approach is this application model here. And the first measure we have is number of resource units per app per minute. And this is a pretty common reason of throttling. So what that means is that your application can execute a number of resource units per minute, and if it goes beyond the threshold, it will get throttled. We'll explain later on what it means, those resource units. So, but it's like a first measure. Going further, we have the similar measure, but then for like a day. So if your app is doing too much across a full day, then it can be throttled as well. Quite seldom, but it can happen. So these are the more common approaches for getting throttled. On the left side, for the user here, if your request is tied to a user, either being a delegated permissions or just being like a SPFX web part making a call to a REST endpoint, then we also measure how much user requests happen in a certain time window, and if that goes beyond the threshold, that can lead to throttling as well. Again, quite rare. Then finally, there is some farm level spike protection in place just to protect the resources. Very rare that you get throttled by this one. Eventually, your request comes here. We need to, and in most cases, almost all cases, it's green. Your request happens, and you're good to go. You get your data back, and you can issue the next request. If you get throttled, you're not so happy, but throttling is a common concept and it's easy to deal with. You get either a 49 or 503 HTTP error. You catch those exceptions. There is a retry after header telling you you have to wait for like X seconds, 10 seconds, 20 seconds. So you wait and you then just retry the same request again. So, and then you're good to go. So this is how it works. Now we use those resource units. We talked about that previously. Resource units is our way to document what your application can do before it gets throttled. And the number of resource units an application gets is depending on the tenant size. So the larger the tenant is, the more one particular application can do. So the 50K tenant, you get 6,000 resource units. A small one, you get 1,200. And it's per minute. So we have a bucket of 1 minute, and all requests in that minute, if you don't exceed this quota, you're not throttled. If you exceed, you're throttled. Furthermore, those resource units, they are translated to requests. So like you do a request, and a request can be a CSAM request, a graph request, a SharePoint REST request. All these requests are kind of checked and possibly throttled. Though the graph requests are kind of more favored in this model. So if there's a graph equivalent over SharePoint REST or CSAM equivalent, then you should use that. It's more favorable when it comes to throttling. For the graph side, so we have actually defined all the calls, and you can kind of translate your request into resource units. So if you do a delta request with a token, that is just one resource unit. If you do expand of permissions, that will count for 5, because that's a really expensive call for us. Overall, I think the best guidance is to just assume 2 resource units per request. So if your app does 1,000 requests, that means 2,000 resource units on average. That also then applies to SharePoint system and REST. So that's an easy way to calculate that. Moving on to rate limit headers. So you've now learned when you get throttled and why you get throttled. Now, throttling is not a good thing. Well, it's a good thing to protect the service, but you don't like it in your application because when you get throttled, your application kind of gets to a stop. And for that, we've recently introduced a new concept called rate limit headers. So rate limit headers are response headers. So when you do a request, you get a response back. That response contains can contain, just to be clear, 3 new headers. A rate limit dash limit, showing you what's your capacity that you have, and like the 1,250 of 1,200 for a small tenant. If you have a big tenant, it will be 6,000. So how much can you consume? Where are you? How much is remaining? So in this case, there's 1,200, there's 120 resource units remaining. And finally, the reset header, it will tell you like, okay, when will this 1 minute time window expire? And I again start with a new set of 1,200 resource units. So we give you this information, and then you can use this information to start slowing down. The idea is that when you're about to get throttled, let's say you're at 90% of consumption of your resource units, then you maybe want to do a little pause, so to avoid getting throttled altogether. One more thing is that those headers, if you start testing this and you maybe don't see those headers immediately appearing, and that's accurate and normal because those headers only appear when you are above 80% of your allocated quota. So if you don't see the headers, you're all good. You can keep going. If the header starts to appear, and then you need to act on them. Now you might wonder, like, okay, but why should it do all of this? What's the value for me dealing with those rate limit headers? And for that, I've made this graph over here, where you see a number of requests over time. So let's take a graph when you're not using rate limit headers. So your application, you launch your application, it kicks off like 5 threads, 10 threads, all those threads, they start hitting SharePoint, and you keep ramping up, and everything goes well. At a certain point, you get throttled, and then you get to more like a flat line. Your application gets fully throttled, and it has to wait until all the throttles kind of expire, and you're good to go again, and then you see this ramping up again, flat line, ramping up, flat line. So you really get those kind of stops in the application. If you would use rate limit headers, the green line, you start at the same speed initially, but then whereas the throttling would kind of get you a full stop, rate limit headers will slow you down a little bit, but you don't fully stop. Then you pick up again because you're in the next minute. Again, some small delay because you're delaying some of the requests, full speed, delay, and so on. The good thing is that this gives you extra throughput. And the reason why is because you avoid getting throttled, and that just saves requests. If you get throttled and you try again, then you do 2 requests, not 1. So you do 2 requests against a particular quota that you have. So the more you get throttled, the more you kind of worsen the situation. So that's why using rate limit headers will give you more throughput in the same time window compared to not using them. All right, time for some demo. I'm looking at the chat. If there's anything specific, Vesa, then I can handle that, but I don't see anything.
No, nothing too specific.
Nothing special.
Let's do the demo, and we can follow up afterwards. Yep.
Yep. All right. So demo. Visual Studio over here. And actually, let me do one more thing. I'm going to paste some links. So in the chat, you see a link to the SharePoint throttling page, which is the basic documentation, and also to the sample. So you can, the code I'm showing here, you can just follow along and already look at the code there and play around. The sample to test this is relatively simple. What it does is it allows you to kick off a number of threads, like 5, and decide whether you want to use rate limit headers, yes or no. So you can really experiment and play with it and learn. That's the goal behind. To use the application, you need to have an Azure application configured, which is done here already. Is in the documentation how to configure things, but in this case, we set up an application with a certificate because we're using application permissions. I'm not going into the details of that, so just check out documentation to learn more on how to do that. Then the key thing in the application is this HTTP client and throttling handler. Now, to explain that a bit better, I'm going to go back over here and go to this slide. So in .NET, HTTP client is the core class that you use to make a HTTP request, to call something, to call SharePoint, for example. And in the HTTP client model, there's a concept called delegating handlers, which allow you to kind of extend and plug in a functionality inside the HTTP client. So in our demo, we built a delegating handler called throttling handler that will handle the throttling, but also will handle the rate limiting. So using the rate limiter.cs class. So let's have a peek at both of these classes. Going back to the code. So here we have our HTTP client, and you see that we are kind of passing in a throttling handler. Going into the throttling handler, the main thing is that we have an override of the send async. So when you make a request, you do call the send async method on the HTTP client. And in here, we have a loop. And in this loop, let me go to the bottom, we do the request. So we call SharePoint, call a REST API, call a Graph API. We call an API. We get the response. And if we're not throttled, then we're good. We return the response. Otherwise, we clone the request and try again. So because this is a loop. So this code shows you how to handle throttling and how to retry. Now the key part of this demo is the rate limiting. And for the rate limiting, the thing is that when you do a request, at a certain point in your response, you see those rate limit headers appearing. So your code needs to look at the responses coming in and store the information that comes in the response. And then for the next request, you have to then validate, like, can I make this request or should I wait? So the first part is looking at the response and possibly storing rate limit headers. That's done using this using the rate limiter class and the update window method. So let's go over there. And this method is very simple. It will check the response headers. Are those headers there? So the limit remaining reset headers. And if they're there, they're just stored. And that's it. So we have a thread safe way to read those headers and store them. So fairly basic. Going back. In here, before we actually make the request, so we imagine that our last request gave us some rate limit headers and we store them. The next request we want to make, we want to look at those rate limit headers and decide whether we can continue, yes or no. And that's done using the wait async method, again in the rate limiter class. And this one, you see us here looking at the data we collected and then decide whether we should wait, have a delay or not. In this case, in the sample, you can tune the delay based upon the minimum capacity left. So what this means is that whenever we have 10% of resource units left or less than 10%, then we'll wait. If not, we continue. And this figure, it may depend on your application. If you do lots of parallel threads, you might want to put this a bit lower. If you have just 2 threads, you can maybe put it on 5 or even less. Good. Going back over here, we explain those things. So the HTTP client can be used to make a Microsoft Graph call, SharePoint REST call. For CSOM, it's a bit special there to make a CSOM call. But you can do SharePoint CSOM call using our CSOM libraries, all good. But to get the response and look at the response headers, you need to plug in a custom web request executor factory, which then can use this HTTP client. So this same HTTP client is used for making graph calls, REST calls, and CSOM calls. Right, let's go back to my demo class, and we explained this. We explained that now here we are starting a number of parallel threads, and each thread does some work. In this case, in a loop, we are calling REST, graph, and CSOM, and then we just get a response back. So it's a fairly simple application doing 3 calls. Now, let me just, to start, use it with rate limit headers on 5 threads. So I press F5, the application starts to run. Yes, that's a little annoying thingy there. Okay, let me make this bigger so you can see more. And what you see now is that the application started. We have those 5 threads that we kicked off. Each of those threads is doing calls, doing a REST call, graph call, and a CSOM call. And at a certain point, you will see this application getting rate limit headers. They start to appear when we are at the 80% mark. And then if you'll then see how they are kind of processed and how the application will wait. So we have to wait like 20 seconds more because we have this 1 minute window that we use for the resource unit checking. And here you see already rate limit headers appearing. You see for CSOM, for graph, for REST. So it doesn't matter which API you use, you get the same rate limit headers. And you see the reset, like, so it's still good. We're not having to wait yet because I configured this like only wait once we are at the less than 10%, which starts to happen right now. So you see this graph request is delayed for 4 seconds. Another CSOM request delayed for 8 seconds. So you see how it works. So now we're kind of slowing down a little bit. And once this slowdown is done, once we're in a new minute, we can kind of speed up again and then slow down again. And this is how this kind of works with rate limit headers. Now I'm going to stop this application and let's try again without using rate limit headers and see what will be the difference. So same application, but now we just ignore rate limit headers. Pressing F5. Let's zoom in a little bit. So it starts the same. You get the same speed in the beginning. Application starts to issue the SharePoint REST, CSOM, a max of graph calls. And at a certain point, we'll see a different behavior. Looking at the chat. There's too many messages to really see the questions, if there are questions. Any questions, Vesa, that I need to address?
I think people are answering the questions. There's a good chat ongoing on the implementation, and people are being impressed on seeing this live. This is really cool.
Okay, so. Good. Thanks. We're getting close to the 1 minute time window. Remember that we had that 1 minute, and we're pushing hard, and now you see throttling happening. Now you might say, yeah, whatever, throttling is good. Well, I'll just wait, but look at the wait times. 30 seconds, 39, 40, 43, 42. So when you get throttled, you also tend to see like longer wait times. The retry after header is telling you to wait longer, which really means this application gets to like a full stop. And once the minute is kind of over and all the wait times are gone, we'll kick off again and we start going. But this is not really that efficient compared to using the rate limit headers. So that's why we have those headers. No point in keeping this running. I'm going to close it. Looking at the time, okay, we have a couple of minutes. Let's go back to slides and let's go to some Q&A. Common questions that we get when talking to customers, and I see this. Are exceptions possible? The answer is no. Even first party uses the same logic and the same rules for most parts. The user agent string, what about that thing? Because we initially said like you have to specify user agent and we can give you exceptions. A long time ago it was. Today, no exceptions anymore. User agent, not required, but if you specify it, it's fine because it helps support and kind of investigate and understand which application, which version of an application is making a particular request. So if you have it in there, just leave it in, it's good. An interesting one. Can I use multiple Azure applications? You just told me that one application gets so many resource units. What if my application just uses 5 Azure AD applications and load balances across those? Is that fine? The answer is no, that's not fine. Simply because you will start to exhaust the complete tenant, and that will impact all applications inside the tenant. So if you do this behavior, you will see that things start to fall down, and then your customer will not be happy because multiple applications will get heavily throttled or even blocked at a certain point if this keeps on going. So definitely a no-go. Should I use a service user with delegated permissions versus application permissions? Again, the answer there is no, bad idea. Because a service user is a user. And remember that we had that left column when you had the funnel, we also check how many requests a user does. And if you use a service user, you're likely to kind of run over those limits and get throttled. So if your scenario is a backend scenario, then you just use the application permissions and not the service user concept. Last ones. My app needs to read all content and stay up to date. So I have an application that needs to monitor all files in all libraries across all sites in my tenant. Can I do that? Yes, that's possible. We have a concept called scan guidance, which explains how to do it. But it comes down to the fact that you do initial kind of crawling of the content that you need, and then you use subscriptions and Delta queries to update your copy of the content. So you do scan everything just once, and then you do Delta updates. So, and using this pattern, you can really process a lot of content in your application while not getting too much throttling. And the last one, load testing. Is this a good idea? Like many of these, the answer is no. Please don't do that because you will get throttled and your test results don't make much sense because you get throttled. And here are the resources that I already talked about and share them in the chat window. With that,
before you close, there was 2 questions which I wanted to ask. Is all of this automatic in the PnP PowerShell and PnP Core SDK? Was the specific questions in and what about Graph SDKs? Is all of this taking into account in those?
Really good question. For the PnP side, in the Core SDK, this is implemented but not turned on by default. So there's a configuration option allowing you to just turn it on. And then you can say, like, I want to apply weighting when we are at 10% capacity left or 15%. So you can choose that, like in this demo. So that's there in Core SDK. The framework and PowerShell is not on by default and not there yet. So we still have some work to do to kind of integrate that fully into the SDKs. And the same applies for the Graph SDKs. So today they don't officially have this built in. You can start to add this yourself, but it's not natively built into the SDKs today.
Cool. Really, really cool and awesome demo. I shared the sample link to the sample in the chat already. We'll put it in the summary blog post and all of that. So, and a great work on the sample as well. The documentation on that is awesome. It's for everybody to understand what's available and how things work. So thank you, Bert, on that.
Thank you.
Really awesome. Now, Gary, let's then move on your topic of today.
Share my screen. yeah, let's talk about building your first workflow bot using Teams Toolkit for Visual Studio Code. A little bit about me. My name is Gary Trinder, Cloud Developer Advocate at Microsoft. Joined Microsoft. I did lots of development and consultancy and architecture beforehand, was an MVP. If you've not checked out the CLI for Microsoft 365, please check it out. I'm also a maintainer there. If you want to follow me about Microsoft 365 dev, then you can get me on the socials. You'll find me mainly on Twitter, but obviously if you're not on Twitter anymore, there are plenty of the socials around. You can get the rest of my details from my link tree. Just wanted to cover really small agenda. First, going to go through what the workflow bot is, introduce Teams Toolkit for Visual Studio Code if you don't know what that is. We'll go through how we create our first project, have a quick run through of the project and how you can run that bot for the first time. And what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to do a bit of a live coding session. We're going to build an order form to really show off the new feature that we're going to talk about today, which is the workflow bot. So, workflow bot. What is a workflow bot? Well, a workflow bot is actually it's a new feature that's been released in the latest version of Teams Toolkit for Visual Studio Code. Essentially, this workflow bot is designed to make it really easy for you to capture responses from users in Microsoft Teams. So you might send them an adaptive card with an action on there, or maybe a mini form, and you want them you want the users to enter information, submit that, and how you capture that back has not been trivial. So this workflow bot approach in Teams Toolkit for Visual Studio Code just really simplifies that, and I'll show a great example of an order form later on, which we'll go through. So I mentioned Teams Toolkit. So this is what we're going to use to build our workflow bot. If you don't know what Teams Toolkit Visual Studio Code is, it's a Visual Studio Code extension that you can install from the marketplace, which gives you functionality to create, debug, and publish your Teams apps to your Microsoft 365 tenant. It supports JavaScript and TypeScript as well. If you are interested in Teams development but not interested in JavaScript or TypeScript, there is a Visual Studio version of Teams Toolkit as well. So if you're in .NET and C#, check that out. But for today we're going to look at the JavaScript and TypeScript versions. So let's just go straight into the demo. So I'm going to show you quickly how to create this this initial project. So I'm just going to move into Visual Studio Code. So if you haven't installed Teams Toolkit, like I mentioned, you can simply go to the marketplace, search for Teams Toolkit, select that. So you see 4.1.1 is the latest version. So as long as you're running 4.1.0, you'll have the ability to create this workflow bot, which I'm going to show you. So once you've installed that, you'll have the Teams Toolkit icon on the left-hand side, which gives you the ability to create a new Teams app or actually create samples that have already been created in a gallery. We'll quickly just go through the steps of how to create this workflow bot. So click New Teams App button, click Create New Teams App again. And in here in the scenario-based Teams App selection screen, we've got the workflow bot, which is new. So let's select this. Like I mentioned, we've got options of 2 languages, JavaScript or TypeScript. I quite like TypeScript, so I'm going to choose that. And we need to basically give a location of where our project is going to be created. So I'm just going to use the default folder for now. And I'll just give it a name, and we'll call it Community Call. And Teams Toolkit is going to go away and it's going to scaffold a new project, which it's just done, and it's going to open that up for us. And it'll also open up a README file with some information about this template as well. And so, if you're coming to this and after the call potentially and you want it to look through, there's tons of information here which just describes about the project, what the individual files are, and how you can extend it. I'm just going to quickly cover what these folders are that it's generated. So we've got an FX folder. So this is where the Teams Toolkit configuration lives. We've got the VS Code folder, which is all the debug settings, debug profiles for Visual Studio Code. We have our bot folder, which is where our source code lives for our bots. You can see the source folder in there. And we have a templates folder, which contains our app manifest templates and also our Azure templates, Bicep templates for when we actually want to deploy this into Azure and get this running somewhere other than our own machine. So I'm just going to quickly jump into the bot folders. So we've got a few folders in here, and I'll just quickly expand them. So if you've used Teams Toolkit before and you've maybe used the command bots template, this kind of builds on top of that template. So we have command handlers, which is our instruction for our bot to do something, and we have some card actions, which is okay when an activity, a button's been clicked on that. On a card that's been added into our Teams chat. By invoking that command, we can get the response. And we've got a couple of adaptive cards as well, just to kind of render a bit of a UI and when we actually get a response as well. A few model files in there as well, and we have an initialize file, which is where our kind of bot configuration lives. So by default, we have a hello world command handler. So we're going to invoke hello world, and we're going to get a response. And then we have a do stuff action handler, which is going to be invoked when we actually perform an action on one of the adaptive cards. So I'm just going to skip quickly to a project that I've already created and I've already got running. So here is my project. It's exactly the same as what I've just shown you, but it's actively running. I'm just going to show you a few things which I've done to get this running. In Teams Toolkit, I've actually authenticated with my my Microsoft 365 tenant, and it's checked that I've got side loading enabled as well, which has allowed me to install my app locally and have that running. And I've also then gone to the debug, selected my profile, which is Edge, and hit F5, and that started the debug process, and it's installed the app for me and all the other resources that I need to run this app in Microsoft Teams. So I'm going to switch to Teams. So this is the app that's already running. I've already side-loaded this into Teams. And to invoke our bot, we're going to invoke the hello world command. So if I run hello world, I get a response with an adaptive card that has a button on it. And when I click do stuff, the adaptive card actually gets replaced. So what has just happened there is we've had a response that's come back to our bot, and our bot has gone, okay, great, I've had something happen from an adaptive card that I've sent out, and now I can replace that that adaptive card with something that just confirms that that something has happened. It's a really, really basic example, but I'm going to show you something that's a bit more real world. This is a great way of being able to capture data as well, so through a form. So I'll actually go through and show you that, so it's a bit more real world. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump through and I'm going to guide you through the steps of how to build out this form. And as I'm going through, I'm going to explain all the different areas of how this bot actually works. So if I go back to my project. So the first thing that I want to do is I'm going to create a new adaptive card. So this is going to be our response to our command. I'm going to paste in this adaptive card. Now, just to show you what this actually looks like, I've actually used a sample. So if you go to the adaptive cards website, there's loads of samples in here. Scroll all the way down to the bottom, we've got a restaurant order, which is a form that has validation in it, has some sample data and sample adaptive card definition as well. So what I've done is I've taken that and I've made some slight adjustments. I've dropped the version to 1.4 so that Teams supports it. And I've also changed the action. So this is a button that allows us to place our order. And I've changed this to action execute, and I've provided a verb. So what's happening here is when I actually click that button, a verb is going to be sent back to my bot saying, I've got an action here called order placed. Have you got anything to handle that? And then a handler is going to kick in and then basically work with the response that we've got. So there is our adaptive card. What we're going to do now is I'm going to go to our models, and I am going to just paste in a load of interfaces. So this describes our order form effectively for our adaptive card. This is going to help when we are combining our template with some data. So the data to actually add items into the drop downs in that form. So we've got an order interface, which includes the form information, the individual order, and some questions, and the items of the actual drop-down values as well. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create a new command handler. So this is going to be an order command handler. So what this is going to enable us to do is actually invoke a order command in our bot. So what we do is we create a new class that implements this TeamsFX bot command handler. So I'm just going to import that in, and then I'm going to implement the interface, which provides us with a trigger pattern and a function that essentially gets called when our bot basically picks up that someone sent a message to it with this particular pattern. So I mentioned we want order to be our keyword. So when order's put in, it's actually going to fire this function. One thing which I'm going to quickly do is I'm just going to add the async keyword here to the command received function. So we actually need that. First thing is I'm going to create a constant which contains our data that we're going to pass into our adaptive card template. So in here you can see the different questions and the different values that we have available. And then the next step, what we're going to do is combine the data and our adaptive card, and then return our adaptive card back to our bot chat. So I'm just going to import some of these statements. And I'm going to import our adaptive card as well, which I'll have to just do this manually. It's called order card. Adaptive cards and order command response. Actually bring in our order data type as well, which is in here. Yeah, so there's our model. So this is our command that's going to get invoked. It's going to send an adaptive card back as a response, and the button is then going to fire this response with an order placed verb. One last thing we need to do to tell our bot that this handler actually exists. So if we go to the initialize file in here, I can add my new handler, which was our order command handler, and save that. So at this point, we've set up the actual command. The next thing we need to do is set up our handler to pick up the values coming the other way. So what we will do is we'll create another adaptive card, which is going to be order placed action response. Okay, so I'm going to paste this in here, and it's simply just going to respond back with some confirmation of what we actually selected in the drop-downs, and then provide some extra buttons actually. So we could carry on if we wanted and add more action handlers in here and add more verbs, so that the cards can basically roll into one another. Let's add our model as well in here. So we're going to add in our response data and the shape for our action data as well. So this is going to be the shape of the data that's going to come back from our form. So the entry select val is an ID that's actually in the adaptive card as well. So it provides that JSON object back to us. Okay, now let's create our actions. So we've got an action here that's going to be the order placed action handler. And this time we're going to use a different interface, so the adaptive card action handler from TeamsFX. Let's implement that interface. I'm just going to quickly get rid of this because we don't need it. But we have our trigger verb. So similar to our trigger pattern, we can actually put in our verb in there. So when the verb is detected, it's going to run our handle action invoked method. So I'm going to make that async as well. And one of the things that we're going to do, so we can see we've got our action data that's provided for us. This is the information that's submitted in the form. Rather than this being an any, let's actually return that as order action data. So that's strongly typed. And then what we're going to do is create our response data object. So this is our shape for the adaptive card that's actually going to be sent back in replace of our form. And I'll add that in here, same codes. It's very similar to the way that the actual commands work. The response card, just import the card, which is order placed action card. No, response. That's where Copilot didn't help because it gave me the wrong thing. Right, okay, so that is our class actually created, and our final thing is we want to add our card action into our bot. So this is our order placed. Add the import, and now I can save this. So we've implemented command, implemented the action, implemented all of the adaptive cards. So let's go back to our adaptive card and put in order. And we have our form, which has all values in. So I'm definitely going to have steak after this, maybe some noodles, and definitely coffee. I'm going to hit place order. And there we go. We have our response. We have our responses back to us. We have a button which we can carry on. We can add more actions and even provide edit orders, save orders as well. And that is time. That is the demo. I'll not carry on, Vesa. I'll let you take that back.
Yep. Excellent, Carol. Really awesome. This is a great demo, great storyline, and great way of actually flipping those adaptive cards. So really, really cool. So let me share my screen. We'll close up the call right away so that there's no extra time for those. Now, thank you, Bert. Really awesome demo. And thank you, Gary. Really awesome stuff as well. We went 1 minute long, but it's okay. So these things do happen. And it's important that we actually get a full functioning demo like we did, which is really, really cool. So the recording will be available within 24 hours at the Microsoft 365 community YouTube channel. You cannot download the recording directly from the chat, so just a word of a warning on that one. We always get requests on getting access on those recordings. That does not work for external people in the Microsoft Teams chat. Follow us on Twitter in Microsoft 365 Dev on M365 PMP, the easiest way to stay up to date on what's actually happening and with all of the new videos and announcements. The next Microsoft 365 platform call is on November 15th, 8 a.m. Pacific time, so next Tuesday, and then we have a lot of other calls. You can check them out. But thank you for this one. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Bert, one more time for your great stuff. And thank you for really active discussion from all of the attendees within the chat as well. Thanks, everybody. Stay safe. Let's stay in touch. Bye-bye.